All right, joining me now here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is Kari Lydersen. Kari is a Chicago-based journalist whose work has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Progressive Magazine. She is a contributing editor at In These Times, as well as the author of several books. Her latest is Mayor 1%, Rahm Emanuel and the Rise of Chicago's 99%, all of which you can find at KariLydersen.com. Kari, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so Kari, I guess my first question is, what exactly was your motivation? What was your inspiration for writing a book about Rahm Emanuel?
Yeah, well, it's actually the idea of the publisher, Haymarket, and they approached me with the idea about, I guess it was exactly 2 years ago, just a couple months into his term, and I think they really had pretty great foresight in doing that, because at the time, well, actually, people are already starting to be, dissatisfied with the mayor, and he'd already been clashing with unions a bit. But it was, I think, part of our idea, or at least my idea at the start, was to kind of shed light on who the real Rahm Emanuel is. And by the time the book came out, we didn't really need to do that because, he'd already made it clear. So it became more a project to document, what he was doing, and just as importantly, or more importantly, how Chicagoans were responding to that.
Yeah. We'll get into his term so far as mayor shortly, but what's kind of crazy is Chicagoans really shouldn't be surprised with what they've gotten from Rahm Emanuel. Describe a little bit of Rahm's history and how there actually was plenty of warning signs going in before he was mayor of Chicago.
Yeah, well, from really early on, he was kind of one of the central people, at least behind the scenes, and then more prominently a bit later for kind of the DLC, New Democrat, wing of the Democratic Party that's very focused on privatization and cutting back on the public sector and on unions. And from the time he was really young and getting his start with Mayor Daley and then with Bill Clinton in Bill Clinton's run for the White House, he was, well, for one thing, he was an expert fundraiser, and his personality traits that have become famous were really prominent, just his aggressiveness and his, win at all costs approach. And which aren't necessarily bad things, but it's more what he used those skills in the service of, I guess, that became problematic. So he was, when he was in the Clinton White House, he was probably played a central role he definitely played a central role in crafting and passing NAFTA. That's something he really took credit for and still talks about as one of his proudest achievements. And so that would definitely be a big red flag, because before it was passed, unions and NGOs and really people across the spectrum were warning what kind of impacts it would have on jobs in the U.S. And then it also, of course, had really devastating effects on Mexico. And then there were other things like Clinton's kind of get tough on crime policies that really ratcheted up the incarceration rate. And, those were things that it's hard to tell exactly what Rahm Emanuel's role was, but I think it's safe to say that those policies were in keeping with, with what he ended up doing when he was acting more on his own behalf. So anyway, then after Clinton, he had a brief but really lucrative stint in the private sector where he made about $18 million in just 2 years in investment banking, and also serving on the boards of different companies and of Freddie Mac. And so that, also just is really revealing in terms of his deep connections with high finance. And I'm sure at least some of that money was, essentially an investment on what he would do in the future. And then he went on to Congress and then was, of course, in the Obama White House. And like in the Clinton White House, it's hard to tell, exactly. I mean, there's no necessarily proof of exactly what he did behind the scenes, but there have been a lot of insider reports that he was really central to kind of killing some of the things that Obama had promised or indicated he would do during the campaign, like an immigration bill and a climate bill. And Rahm Emanuel, it sounds like, had a pretty central role in kind of protecting the banks during the whole bailout process, which was started during Bush, but carried out while Obama was in the White House. And then he also, one thing that I think is just kind of revealing on a personal level is he was considered really central to what they were calling the women problem in the Obama White House. It sounds like he really, him and Larry Summers really steamrolled over powerful women like Christina Romer, who was advocating a more FDR-style approach during the bailout and during financial reform. And, just on a personal level, there's a lot of kind of anecdotes that reveal him to be, really, I think you could go ahead and say, sexist and, just unwilling to listen to anyone who wasn't his kind of small boys club.
Yeah.
I could go on, but those are a few things.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm talking to Kari Lydersen, author of the new book, Mayor 1%, Rahm Emanuel, and the Rise of Chicago's 99%. In the introduction of the book, you describe an event that happened in 2012 at a party celebrating I think it was the 175th birthday of the city of Chicago. And it's actually, I think, a really telling example of just how Rahm deals with people who don't agree with him or who have opposing views of him or have any type of conflict with him. Describe what actually went down at that party.
Yeah, well, that's where, so one of the groups that I really tried to highlight in the book and who I think is just a really inspiring example of grassroots activism in Chicago is a group called the Mental Health Movement. And this is a network of mental health consumers, and a lot of them who attend the city's free public clinics. And really, those clinics play a really, really central role in their lives and in helping them stay healthy. And so over the years, including under Mayor Daley previously, the city's been chipping away at these clinics and moving to close them. So one of the things that Mayor Emanuel did in his first budget was close 6 of the 12 city public health mental health clinics. And so one of the women who was central to the mental health movement and who really, really depended on her clinic for moral support and just her whole social network and her actual health care was a woman named Helen Morley. And she was convinced that if her clinic closed, she would die. And she had this sort of mantra that she would say it. The movement, before this birthday party over the previous months, the movement had a number of sit-ins at City Hall and protests and different things demanding that the clinics not be closed. And she was always there talking about how important the clinic was to her and saying, if you close my clinic, I will die. So at the city's birthday party, the mental health movement was there, and they figured this would be a good place to, to make their public statement. And it was in a very sort of, respectful, completely nonviolent way, but they were holding up a banner and, letting the mayor know that he needed to reopen or to not go through with the plans to close those clinics. And Helen just sort of elbowed her way through the crowd and was heading toward the mayor, who was up kind of in the front where a choir was singing happy birthday to the city and things like that. And she was just pleading with him basically to listen to her. And it wasn't even in a hostile way. She was literally saying, please, Mayor Emanuel, listen to me and don't close this clinic. And so I think the way he responded, regardless of all the budgetary and, pragmatic debates over what the best way was to deal with these clinics, even if he was going to close them, I think the way he responded to Helen really says a lot about his way of governing and just his personality as a leader. Sorry, the dog barking.
It's all right.
So he completely ignored her. There was no way you could ignore this woman who was obviously in extreme distress, making a scene and, making her way to the front of this event. And he really studiously ignored her and then just kind of ducked out a door, obviously a lot earlier than he'd been planning to leave. And as far as I know, I never really got in-depth answers from the city, but as far as I know, no one from his office or from the health department really, reached out to her and made sure that she was okay. Or like I was saying in the introduction, at that moment, could a staffer not have, even just gone up to her and tried to comfort her. You know, they didn't do any of that. It's kind of a pattern of treating people who are critical of him or even who are just needy, you know, as the enemy. So I thought that was just one really revealing example of what was actually has been a much deeper trend during the administration.